You can go ahead.
Oh, I'm Stephanie Alexander. This is my grandfather, Doyle Maxwell. And what's your name?
My name is Doyle Maxwell.
How old are you?
Well, I'm 69 right now, but the 22nd of October, which I'll be 70.
And where do you live?
I live at 4633 Catclaw Drive in Abilene, Texas,
Part of the time.
when I'm not traveling.
Where did you go to high school?
I went to high school at, well, actually I went to two different schools. I went to Clyde High School through my sophomore year, and then I moved to Big Spring, and I finished high school at Big Spring, Texas.
And where did you go to college?
Went to college at Arlington State College, which is now called the University of Texas of Arlington, but at the time I went, which was in the 1950s, well, it was known as Arlington State College.
And are you married?
Yes, I'm married. In fact, Ben said, I'm glad you asked that. I get a chance to plug something here. See, I'm going to celebrate my 50th wedding anniversary February the 1st of 2005. So about 6 months from now, we'll be celebrating my 50th wedding anniversary.
And how long have you been married?
How long have I been married? Well, it'll be 50 years in February.
Tell food.
How many kids do you have?
I have 3 daughters and 3 son-in-laws. I guess I'll have to count my outlaws as in-laws or kids, wouldn't I? So I've got 3 daughters and 3 son-in-laws and 6 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren.
Where were you born?
Well, I'm going to tell you the name of a town you probably never heard of, but it's called Luther, Texas. It's a little town outside of Big Spring, and I was actually born in the farmhouse there on the farm, and that was back in 1934 during the Depression.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
Well, I have 3 sisters and 4 brothers. There was 8 in my family, and but I only have I've got 2 brothers living and 1 sister living, that's still living.
And what towns have you lived in throughout
The different towns?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I've lived in Llano, Texas, which is in South Texas, and I've lived in Big Spring, of course, and Clyde, Texas, and Eastland, Texas, and Breckenridge, which also is Texas. A lot of people think I'm talking about Breckenridge, Colorado, but unfortunately it was Breckenridge, Texas, but it's a nice town, ranching community. But then I moved from Breckenridge to Abilene, and that's where I supposedly retired.
What are your hobbies?
My hobbies, well, I like to do woodworking, and I guess one of my hobbies, Stephanie, is some people play golf and that kind of thing, and I like to take an old house that's been abused, kind of like some people abuse their children, some people abuse their cars and things, but some people abuse their houses, so I like to find an old house that somebody has kind of abused and it needs repairs and upgraded, so I like to go in and redo that house and make it something that's attractive and something someone would like to live in. So that's kind of my hobby, I guess, is to restore old houses and remodel them.
And what church do you go to?
I go to the Baker Heights Church of Christ here in Abilene, and I've been a member of the Church of Christ since I was 30 years old. So that's been about 40 years.
Did you play any musical instruments in high school?
Well, my musical abilities are kind of limited. Actually, though, when I was in, I believe it was the 2nd or 3rd grade, well, I was in what was known as the rhythm band. I don't even know if they have those anymore, but I really wanted to play the tambourine real bad, but they put me on the chopsticks, so I just played, not chopsticks, but sticks. That's chopsticks you eat with it, but these were just sticks, and you just kept rhythm with them. You just banged them together, and that was my musical talent, I guess. They didn't feel like I could play anything else.
Did you play football?
Yes, I played football when I lived at Clyde. I was one of the Clyde Bulldogs.
How tall?
How tall? Well, I'm kind of getting shorter as I get older, but I've been 5'11" and a half most of my life.
What do you do for your career in life?
For my career? Well, I was fortunate, I guess, when I was going to high school that I went to work under a diversified education program that it was a program that the school had. It was where you worked half a day and went to school half a day. This was after you were in your junior year. And so I went to work for, first of all, electric motor rewinding company called K&T Electric there in Big Spring. I worked for them half a day, and I would go to school half a day. And then my senior year, though, I went to work for what was then called Texas Electric Service Company, which is now known as Texas Utilities. But at that time, it was Texas Electric Service Company. And I went to work as a meter repairman and tester. I tested meters and repaired them, and while I was going to school. And I guess I got lucky, but they thought enough of me that they offered me an opportunity to go to college after I graduated in high school. So I went down and took a test at one of the power plants, and so they selected me to be one of those recipients of a scholarship they had with Arlington State College at that time. So, and it was kind of an unusual thing because what you did is they paid your tuition and your books and stuff. You had to provide your own lodging and food and things, but they provided me with a job, and I would go to school for one semester, and then I'd have to go back home and work for the company then for a semester. And they had another group that was alternating with us. So, but I'd go to school a semester and work a semester, and then in the summers, of course, you work. And a couple of times I went to summer school too, but I progressed up through. I worked in nearly every department as a matter of training for them, and so I started off, like I said, as a meter tester and repairman, and then I was a meter installer, and I was a serviceman, which is restoring service whenever you had a storm come through and it knocks the power off. I was a lineman for a while, and then I went into the sales department of the company, and then later was moved into the marketing department, and then I guess it was in 1974, I believe it was, I was named the division customer service and operations manager for the Eastland division, which consisted of some smaller towns like Breckenridge and Eastland and Graham, DeLeon, Gorman, Ranger, some of those towns you may not have heard of, but they were all in my district. So I was responsible for the customer service and operations personnel for that division. I did that job for 17 years. And then I was promoted to a manager of the Breckenridge office, and I worked there as manager for another 6 years before my retirement.
What do you do
In my spare time? What I do, I like to travel, and we've made a trip to Europe. I guess it was 2 years ago now. We went to Scotland and Wales and England to London, and we toured that. We rented a car there and toured, and so we enjoyed doing that. And we made a trip, had a motorhome at the time, and we made a trip to Alaska 1 year. And so we really, I guess, I kind of like to travel and to see the sights and just enjoy God's creation.
And do you have a specific memory that you like from that? Like, what's your favorite memory?
My favorite memory, specifically? Oh, that's a toughie. I've had a lot of good memories, but let's see if I can think of my...
Tell them about your share of land in Clyde.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I don't know that this is the fondest, but it's probably one of the more memorable remembrances that I have. Is when I was a teenager, growing up, we lived on a farm at Clyde, and my brother, older brother, owned a farm down the road, but he had a job in town, so he hired me to, when I got through with our place, I would work for him and do his plowing and taking care of his crops. And in return for that, he gave me 5 acres. This was going to be my pay. He gave me 5 acres that I could plant in whatever crop I wanted to, and what I made off of that crop, then that was mine, and that was my pay for working for him. So one year, I thought, okay, I'm going to plant cantaloupes, because, you know, most people like cantaloupes, and that was good country for it. The land was suited for cantaloupe growing and watermelons and this sort of thing. So I planted 5 acres of cantaloupes, and I don't know how familiar you are with farming, Stephanie, but 5 acres of cantaloupes, if they make, is a lot of cantaloupes. And I had wagon loads of cantaloupes. Well, unfortunately, everybody else did too. So I wound up with a lot of cantaloupes and not much money. But I did buy some hogs, and I fed those cantaloupes to the hogs, so I was able to recoup a little bit that way, and the hogs loved it. But I guess that's one of the more memorable things, because I had visions that I was going to make enough money that I was going to buy me a car, and I was going to, you know, do all these things, and turns out it didn't turn out that way. But it was quite an experience and very memorable for me, because I've learned that you can do a lot of hard work and not necessarily reap a lot of benefit. But it was good for me. I learned some lessons.
We're gonna have some continuing.
Well, you was asking a while ago, and I told you it's hard to think of, you know, one specific memory, but another one I'd like to share with you is, because it's got a little humor in it as well as some other things, but as I told you earlier in our interview, I like to travel. Well, when we were young, we didn't have much money, so I came up with some ideas that in order to get us on a trip or something. So I had observed a Cartop camper one time that was in a store, but I didn't have the money to buy it, so I thought, well, I can build that. You know, my hobbies is woodworking and that sort of thing. So I went home and started building this thing, and what it is, it turns out to be, you build a box that's, it was 4x8 that goes on top of your car. And then I had it where it would fold up, so I had another 4x8 that I cut half in two. And I made it, it was about 12 inches tall when you had it folded up. And then when you unfolded it, it was 8 feet wide. And then I got some foam, not styrofoam, but foam rubber, and made the mattress out of that and put inside that box. And I made a little compartment down at the end. We had 2 small children at that time. Your mother was one of them. And we made small suitcases at the end to keep their clothes in, their night clothes. And but I figured out some mountings to fasten it to the roof of the car, so when you're driving down the highway, it stayed firm and would travel good. But I covered it with some material. It was waterproof. It's old Army type tent material. And I got it at the Army surplus, and I covered that camper with that. And I had it, when you folded it down, that tent was over on the outside of it, and so it was waterproof even when you was driving down the road. But then at night, when we get ready to stop, well, we unfolded that. You'd unfolded it and it made a tent that was shaped like this. And you slept here, and you had, one end was closed, and I had made mosquito netting at each end, and had a little entrance, and I made a little metal ladder that you went up and down on the car. You know, you'd climb up this ladder instead of climbing on your car and get into this camper that was setting up here, shaped like this, and it was 8 foot long and 8 foot wide whenever you had it unfolded. But when you folded it up to travel, it was just 4 foot wide with about 12 inches deep. So it made a pretty neat little deal, and we were, every time we'd pull into a campground, everybody would just walk by and look, where did you get that camper? Well, we had made it, you know, but, and it was pretty neat, and it worked real well. We traveled from Texas to, all the way out to the west coast, California, and up in Oregon, and across the Northwest in that. And it made a real neat little camper, and that was, now your mother and her older sister, they got a little tired. They said they felt like they were sleeping in a coffin, you know, because you didn't have a lot of turning room. But they, I think, look back on it with fond memories. They enjoyed it. We certainly did, and we got to see a lot of country for very little money, just what it cost for gas. We put in a lot of windshield time because we honestly didn't have the money to do a lot of things, but we wanted to see the country. And so I made that little camper, and we put it on top of the car, and we took off, and we had lots of fun. And my wife was concerned about how we were going to bathe, you know. Well, of course, we parked in campgrounds, and they had water available, and they did have the restrooms in the campgrounds. But what we did is I made a little metal attachment that when you pulled out, they slid out these little braces that you folded the camper out on. Well, I took a piece of 10-foot conduit and made a half circle out of it, fitted it on those braces, and we made a tarp that went around it. And we had a little water, what's that called?
A bathtub.
Yeah, we made a bathtub out of it.
Swimming pool.
A little miniature, little small children's swimming pool, and we just slid that under there, pulled the drape, and I had a 5-gallon can, and I punched holes in the bottom of it, and we'd put water in the top, and they'd have a shower. We'd put y'all in there, and we'd shower, and of course we'd do the same thing. Of course, you had to bring your water, but you know, you had to carry your water from the water source and put in your 5-gallon bucket, and it would come out slowly through those little holes I'd punched in there, and you could take a shower. So that's the way we bathed on our trip. It was very enjoyable. We eat out all the time. By that I don't mean like we think today, go to a restaurant and eat out.
Mama cooked.
Mama cooked out. Yeah, we would have our little gas stove, and we'd cook our meals on that. Eat a lot of sandwiches because that was convenient. But we got the tour. We made just about all of the contingent 48 states at that time. So went through that, and then I made one time a little high-low camper that you had to crank it up, and I had a pulley system rigged up, and I made 2 halves of a camper, and it was on wheels that you pull behind your car. And when you got where you wanted to go, well, you just cranked it up, and then you had room to stand up. We actually had a bed in it, and a stove, and a little refrigerator. It was a step up. And when you got ready to travel, well, I had a pulley system, you just like you have on a reeling a boat in on the boat dock, but I'd reel that and let that camper down, and then you didn't have the wind resistance that you had. So then we'd travel that way for several trips and had a lot of fun in it. Then we finally graduated up and bought a motorhome that I referred to a while ago that we actually made the trip to Alaska in. And of course that was comfort, and so we finally got something that was made by somebody besides me. But as we look back on it, some of our most memorable experiences and fun that we had was back in the old do-it-yourself type. It was, I guess people today would call it roughing it, but we had a lot of fun, and the fact that you'd made it gave you a little bit of pride, and especially when people come around and say, "Hey, where did you buy that?" You know, so it was an experience and a memorable time for us in our life. We were raising kids and trying to make a living and wanting to see the world, so that's the way we did it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we win. And incidentally, Stephanie, I want to tell you that you're one of my favorite grandchildren. See, I had to be safe there. And this being recorded, so I can't just say you're my favorite. I've got to say you're one of my favorites. Thank you for that interview. I enjoyed it.